Bob Kesling's era came to an end yesterday, covering Tennessee Vols. For those who don't remember, Kesling took over for John Ward in 1999. John Ward's final season as the voice of the Vols, the most legendary voice of the Vols, by the way, known for Give Him Six, Touchdown Big Orange, It's Football Time in Tennessee. We know John Ward's history of calling games. His last year was Tennessee winning the national championship, and his last call for Tennessee football was the national champion is clad in Big Orange. And then his last basketball game, unfortunately, was to watch Tennessee lose to Southwest Missouri State by 30. So Jerry Green did not send John Ward off right. Bob Kesling gets the job after that, 99, and he immediately takes over for football and basketball, and Bert Bertelkamp becomes the color commentator that year. It's Kesling's and Bertelkamp's last year. Yesterday was their last game calling games, both of them. And it was a 25-year run. And I have to say that it was a memorable 25 years. Actually, it was 26 seasons, if I'm not mistaken. It was actually right at 26 seasons and of Bob Kesling covering football and men's basketball. And Bert Bertelkamp is specific with basketball, but to see Bob Kesling's era come to an end is, for a lot of people, the end of their childhood, the end of them growing up. I mean, when I was young, actually, this was before the SEC got all of its TV deals. Even in Memphis, there were sometimes I couldn't catch Tennessee games on TV, and I listened to Kesling calling it. And I just have to say that was a fun time, and Bert Bertelkamp was a lot of fun too. So we're going to play hot or cold. We're going to talk about basketball and football here. And we're going to look at what were the candidates for the most memorable game Bob Kesling ever called at Tennessee. So hot or cold right now, brought to you by City Heating and Air, 50 years in East Tennessee. Integrity matters, cityheatandair.com. Let's get rolling. All right. We're going to start with football. Bob Kesling called the 2001 Florida game, in which Tennessee beat second-ranked Florida 34-32. Kesling finishes that game by saying, quote, "Hallelujah, the Volunteers have won in Gainesville." Tennessee had not beaten Florida in 30 years in Gainesville at that point. By the way, they're almost approaching another 30 years and having not beaten Florida in Gainesville since 2003, if we're going there. But still, they hadn't beaten them in 30 years to that point, and then they beat them that year and went 34-32. Very bittersweet game, because after getting up to number 2 and getting ready to play for a national title, they lose to a 3-loss LSU team the next week in the SEC championship game. So they don't go to the national title. But that game itself was extremely memorable. 2003 Miami. Bob Kesling goes to Miami. Tennessee goes to Miami, shocks Miami as a 12-point underdog, wins 10-6. And what Dave and I both agree is the best coach game ever by Philip Fulmer. And I'm not saying that to disparage Philip Fulmer. That was an incredibly coached game, because I'm sorry, Miami was a much better team than Tennessee that year. They have much more talent, and Fulmer just coached circles around Larry Coker in that game. One of the greatest fourth down calls ever, the end around to Derek Tinsley. 2016 Georgia, the Dobbs nail boot game instead of the hobnail boot game. The Josh Dobbs Hail Mary to Jawan Jennings to win, which is, as we all now agree, the peak of, you don't want to say this, but was the peak of the Butch Jones career at Tennessee. That got Tennessee to 5-0 at the time. They seemed like they were finally where they needed to be as a program, because they'd gone 9-4 the year before, winning their final 6 games. And then they were 5-0 here. They were on an 11-game winning streak, the longest winning streak in college football. They had beaten back-to-back top 25 teams, Florida and Georgia. They looked like they were ready to roll. And then they lost 3 straight. So similar to the Florida game, 2001, very bittersweet. But hey, that moment was peak for them. And yes, Dylan Elam says that Dobbs receives it, and it is caught. That was Vern who said it that way, though, wasn't it? I could be wrong on that. And then finally, the fourth one was the 2022 Alabama game, where Tennessee storms the field, ends a 15-year losing streak to Alabama. Actually, a losing streak of 15 straight games to Alabama. Beats them for the first time since 2006 off a last-second field goal by Chase McGrath, Hendon Hooker, and the 15-second drive. That's still so underrated that he led Tennessee on a 15-second drive to get Tennessee a 52-49 win. So first, I want to say this, and we're going to get to basketball. But first, Poll question. What was the most memorable football game Bob Kesling called? And we're going to say 2001 at Florida, 2003 at Miami, 2016 at Georgia. Kesling had quite a few good calls on the road, didn't he? Or 2022 versus Alabama. In the moment, I think the Florida game of 2001 was the biggest one. As far as the entertainment value, I say 2016 at Georgia. But as far as like which one is looked back on most fondly, it is 2022 versus Alabama. I mean, that was such a moment of jubilation for a Tennessee program that had suffered so much frustration for so many years. And I'm not trying to knock the loss at Miami, the win at Miami. That was a big one too. But that Miami team, Miami gave it away in a lot of ways. It was kind of a fluky upset. The other ones were just incredible games all the way around. So I'm going to lead with, I'm going to say of those memorable ones, I'm actually going to go 2022 Alabama because it had the excitement. It didn't have the upset value. Florida and Miami had the upset value. Tennessee was 18-point underdogs at Florida. They were 12-point underdogs at Miami. They were 9-point underdogs against Alabama, but at home, I mean, you saw two members of College Game Day pick Tennessee to win that game. Corso and Pat McAfee called for Tennessee to win that game. I think Tennessee, though, I think the hype behind the Alabama game and just everything you felt the program was back after decades of frustration. I think that signified so much, and that's why that game was so memorable. Beating Alabama just meant so much to the program at the time. And I think now you guys on the message board, tell me, did I leave out a game that was better? Now, as far as dramatic call, we are right. I don't think it's a close. Dramatic call, the most dramatic call was the Georgia game, the Tennessee-Georgia game. So General Ursus says, underrated game of the Kesling era is the 2004 Georgia game. Tennessee ended a 4-game losing streak. No, you were right, General Ursus. And funny enough about that Georgia game, I feel like Tennessee fans forget about it a lot, but that was the third straight game they had won when double-digit underdogs on the road. 2001 Florida and 2003 Miami being the other two. They had lost to Auburn 34-10 the week before. They hadn't beaten Georgia in 4 years. They had a true freshman quarterback. And Kevin Burnett, after a loss to Auburn, says, we will see them again, implying we will see them again in the SEC title game the week before they're playing Georgia, meaning guaranteeing they're going to beat Georgia. When Georgia has its best team ever to that point under Mark Richt, having won the SEC title in 2002, played for it in 2003. David Green is a senior. David Pollock's a senior. Fred Davis is a senior. And Tennessee is rebuilding, supposedly, with 2 true freshman quarterbacks. And they go to Athens and face the Georgia team they haven't beaten in 4 years. And they beat them not handily. They won 19-14, but they controlled the game most of the time. Very underrated game. So I do actually agree with you that. And David Speaks also says 2005 LSU comeback was big too. You're right. The 2005 LSU comeback, it's got a little bit of 2001 Florida vibes, but on a much more extreme scale because it's so bittersweet how it happened, because it is the one bright spot in a horrifically bad season for Tennessee. 2002 Arkansas was another classic. Yeah, if I'm doing second tier, I'm giving you 2002 Arkansas, 2005 LSU, 2003 Alabama, by the way, 2004 Georgia, 2016 Florida was memorable. Dylan asked about that. But I just think those 4 guys that I named, I mean, the win over Alabama in 2022 and the win over Florida in 2001, those were like the peak. That was when Tennessee circled those games more than any other, and they won those games. So you have to give those as the biggest wins over those 2 teams that Kesling called. The Miami one was just, if you guys remember, Miami was such an imposing brand at that time. So going down there to win was a huge deal. And then the Georgia game was just the crazy wildness of how that game played out. That's why I put that one on there. I don't think there's any question that I picked the most memorable win against each of their rivals, Florida and Georgia and Alabama, in those calls. And then and then the Miami game was just a special situation. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the most memorable basketball wins in a second. But first, a quick message from, as we're still playing hot or cold, City Heating and Air Conditioning. I guess I should say that I'm hot on Florida being a candidate. I'm hot on Georgia being a candidate, and I'm hot on Alabama being a candidate for the greatest one. I'm not hot on Miami, but it is one of his 4 best calls. Again, hot or cold brought, and then as far as candidates, others that people mentioned, Georgia 2004, LSU 2005, Arkansas 2002, Florida 2016, Alabama 2003. I mentioned them. All great wins, all memorable wins. I'm cold on any of them being considered Bob Kessling's best call. I mean, I could say Alabama in 99 too on that, and Notre Dame in 99. All right, hot or cold brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. In a second, we're going to talk about some of the memorable basketball wins.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard Heating and Air Conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
There's your pair.
All right, welcome back to the program. Playing a little hot or cold on the memorable games that Bob Kesling has called. I talked a little bit of the football ones. You guys vote on the poll. Is the most memorable football game he called 2001 Florida, 2003 Miami, 2016 Georgia, 2022 Alabama? The next question, can any basketball games compete with that? I think there are 3 games that Bob Kesling called that stand out above all others in basketball. You guys tell me if there's one you prefer. I think 2008 at Memphis just stands out above all others. Beating Memphis in 2008, it was a regular season game, number 2 versus number 1 matchup. Tennessee goes to Memphis. The college basketball world stopped for that game. So many factors in there, by the way. Not just 2008, not just number 2 versus number 1. Not just in-state Tennessee versus Memphis. But also, and we're forgetting about this, Bruce Pearl versus John Calipari. The 2 greatest coaches ever at playing to the media. No one plays to the media better than those 2. No one promotes their programs better than those 2. So you had everything in that game. Okay, I still maintain that's the greatest win in Tennessee basketball history. A couple other ones that compete, though, and you guys can come at me if you have any other better ones that outside of the ones I'm naming, but I think 2010 Ohio State in the Sweet 16 when Tennessee upset Ohio State to get to its first Elite 8 ever in history. J.P. Prince blocks a game-tying 3 by Evan Turner for the Vols to win in the Sweet 16. They go to their first Elite 8 ever under Bruce Pearl. That was a huge one. And the other one I have is 2019 Gonzaga in basketball. You guys let me know if I'm missing any. What's your favorites between those? Or if there's another basketball game that was better. And if any of them compete with any of those football wins I named. I mean, football is king. Football drives everything. But you let me know. Hurry up and vote on the poll question because I'm about to take it down. But first, what was the most memorable football game Bob Kesling called? 2001 at Florida? No one is picking that. 6% say 2003 at Miami. 18% say 2016 at Georgia. 76% say 2022 versus Alabama. My guess is many of the Alabama people would have said 2001 at Florida second, but because Alabama was the option, that's why Florida has no vote. So I'm killing that poll question, and here we go with this one. What is the most memorable basketball game that Bob Kesling called? And we're going to say 2008 at Memphis, 2010 versus Ohio State, 2019 versus Gonzaga. And on this one, we're going to go other. And you guys let me know with other on that. I'm going 2008 at Memphis. I'm going to take it out another notch, and I'm going to say that 2008 Memphis rivals some of Tennessee's biggest football wins with how exciting that was. General Ursa says says the SEC tournament championship. Yes, the SEC tournament championship. That was a big one, but I actually think the win over Kentucky the day before was the big one in that one. If you're talking about 2022, that's a really standout one, the SEC tournament title. Now, as far as other games that you could talk about, one that really stands out is 2000, the arrival game for Tennessee under Bruce Pearl. Ironically, was a blowout win at Texas and Rick Barnes. That stands out. Another underrated one is when they beat Florida at home that year when Florida was undefeated. That was Billy Donovan's Florida team that won its first national title. Oh, by the way, then they went to Florida and won. They swept the Florida team that won the national title that year. That was very memorable. Beating Florida at home the next year was very memorable for them, and getting back to the Sweet 16. Sweeping Florida in basketball in 2000 under Jerry Green was memorable to that during that regular season to capture the SEC regular season title. Wins at Rupp Arena in 1999, 2005. It was like a 47-46 win at Rupp in 99 when Kentucky was defending national champions. Sweeping Kentucky in 2018 in the regular season stands out. Getting to the Elite Eight in 2024 and 2025 stand out. Capturing the SEC regular season title. Lots of big wins for Rick Barnes at Tennessee, but I think these three stand out the most. So I'm hot, so I'm cold on Ohio State 2010, cold on 2019 Gonzaga, cold on other, because I think the only one that really, I don't think there's anything that competes with the 2008 one at Memphis, and I think 2008 Memphis actually competes with some of Tennessee football's best wins. So the poll question: what is the most memorable basketball game that Bob Kesling called? 2008 at Memphis, 2010 versus Ohio State, 2019 versus Gonzaga, and other at 0%.